Hi guys, I just want to review this comparing fractions least to greatest assignment with you guys. So in the first video we already did A, so I'm going to jump straight to B. So we have 5/8, 2/8, and 3/8. Now since their denominators all the same number, we can actually just compare these looking at the numerators. You can kind of think of it as like a pizza that's been cut into 8 pieces. If I ate 2 of those 8s, I would have ate less than if I ate 3/8 or 5/8, right? So 2/8 is the least, and then 3/8 would be next, and then 5/8 would be the greatest amount. Okay. Moving on up to this one here that says 2/6, 2/10, 2/8, and 2/3. Since our numerators are all the same, we can just compare them using the denominators. And kind of like we did in A, remember, the bigger the number, the denominator, the more pieces it's been cut into. So 2/10 is going to be smaller than 2/8, which will be smaller than 2/6, and the biggest one here will be 2/3. In D, we have each of these fractions where the numerator is just one number less than the denominator. I like to think of these ones as, well, what are we missing? If we have 7/8, then we're missing 1/8, right? If we have 5/6, then we're missing 1/6. If we have 4/5, then we're missing 1/5. If we have 3/4, we're missing 1/4. If we think of what the amount that's missing, then that's going to tell us how much is that we actually have. So if we're missing 1/4, that's going to be a lot more than missing 1/8. So the smallest is going to be 3/4. Then 4/5 will be next. It's missing a 1/5, which is more than a 1/6. So 5/6 will be our next one. And then lastly, it'll be 7/8. That'll be the one that is the largest amount because it's missing the least amount. For E, F, and G, I want you to use the knowledge you've learned about equivalent fractions in order to find these, unless you're going to use your fraction strips, which is okay too. But if we look at equivalent fractions, it can make it a lot easier for us. So if we think 1/2, 3/4, 5/8, 1/8, and 1/4, what if we made them all 8s? So for 1/2, the equivalent, if we were talking about 8s, would be 4/8, right? Because 1 times 4 is 4, and 2 times 4 is 8. For 3/4, the equivalent 8s would be 6/8, because 3 times 2 is 6, and 4 times 2 is 8. The next two fractions are already 8s, but let's look at the last one, 1/4. To make that 8, we'd have to multiply both the numerator and the denominator, both by 2. It would be 2/8. Now, since I have the denominator all the same size, I just have to look at my numerator and say, well, 1/8 is going to be the smallest, then 2/8, which is 1/4, would be the second smallest. Then I have 4/8 here, that's 1/2. That would be the next. Then 5/8. And then lastly, 6/8, which is 3/4, would be my largest fraction. So if I can make these so that I have all the same denominators, it makes it a pretty easy finish. I'm just looking at my numerators of how many pieces I have. I'm going to do the same thing in F. Since we have tenths, fifths, and halves, let's make them all tenths. So 3/10 we already have. 1/5, well, to multiply, we'd have to multiply 5 times 2 in order to get to tenths, right? So 5 times 2 is 10, and 1 times 2 is 2. So this one would be 2/10. We have 9/10 here. Once again, this is fifths, so we're going to have to multiply the top and bottom both by 2. This would be 8/10. And for 1/2, well, to make 2 10, you're going to have to multiply by 5. So 1 times 5 is 5, and 2 times 5 is 10. Now my numbers are all have tenths in the numerator, or sorry, in the denominator. So the smallest would be 2 tenths, which is 1/5. Then 3 tenths, which is what it says there, 3 tenths. Then my next would be 5 tenths, which is 1/2. Then I have 8 tenths, which is 4/5. And then lastly, 9 tenths, which is 9 tenths, as it says here. Do that one more time. So I have thirds and sixths and halves here. So let's make them all sixths in the denominator. So to make 2/3 sixths, well, I'd have to multiply top and the bottom both by 2. This would become 4/6. 1/6 is the same. To make 2 halves six, I'd have to multiply the top and the bottom both by 3, and that would make 6/6. Then we have 5/6 here, and then to get the 1/3 to be 6, I'd have to multiply the top and the bottom both by 2. 1 times 2 is 2, and 3 times 2 is 6. Now I have now I have denominators of all 6. So 1/6 would be the smallest one. And then the next one I have would be 2/6, that's 1/3. Then I have 4/6 here, that's 2/3. Then I have 5/6 right here, and 5/6 is what it reads as. And then 2 halves is 6/6, so that would be my largest one. That's like a whole anyway. That's as big as I can get in a fraction, that unless we go above 1. So hopefully that helps, guys. That's everything that goes over this assignment. Thanks, guys.